Nestled among towering pines and the gentle sound of a nearby stream, my grandfather's cabin stood as a testament to our family's history. It was more than just wood and nails. It was a sanctuary filled with laughter, stories, and the scent of pine smoke curling from the stone fireplace. Each summer I would arrive, brimming with excitement, ready to explore the woods and listen to my grandfather's tales of adventure. He was a man of wisdom, teaching me the value of nature, family, and hard work. The cabin was his retreat from the chaos of the world, a place where he could share his love for life with those he cherished. As I grew older, those summers became even more precious, a refuge from the pressures of life. I remember the way he would sit on the porch, a smile on his face as he recounted stories from his youth, each tale woven with lessons that shaped my character. The cabin became a symbol of our bond, a piece of our legacy that I vowed to protect. But that legacy now felt threatened. The Homeowners Association had deemed the cabin an eyesore, an obstacle in their quest for conformity in our once vibrant community. Their arrogance blinded them to its value, both sentimental and historical. Little did they know that behind this quiet facade stood a Supreme Court justice, a protector of rights who would fight fiercely for what truly mattered, justice for my grandfather's cherished cabin and all it represented. The conflict with the Homeowners Association began quietly, like a storm brewing on the horizon. I had long heard whispers about their intentions, rumors that they were unhappy with the diverse character of our community. The HOA prided itself on uniformity, enforcing strict guidelines that dictated everything from paint colors to fence heights. My grandfather's cabin, with its rustic charm and unique history, stood in stark contrast to their vision. One afternoon, as I strolled through the neighborhood, I overheard a group of HOA members discussing their plans to clean up the area. Their disdain for my grandfather's cabin was palpable. They referred to it as an eyesore, a relic that didn't belong in their pristine subdivision. Anger simmered within me as I listened to their careless remarks, each one chipping away at the fond memories I held dear. What struck me most was their arrogance, how they believed they could bend the rules without consequence. They had no idea of the power they were provoking. The HOA's president, a self-appointed guardian of taste named Margaret Hargrove, seemed particularly intent on demolishing anything that didn't fit her narrow view of beauty. They planned to bulldoze my grandfather's cabin under the pretense of community improvement, completely disregarding its history and significance. Fueled by a mix of rage and determination, I decided it was time to intervene. Little did they know that beneath my calm exterior lay not only a protector of justice, but a family member ready to fight for what was rightfully ours, a battle for heritage against an entitled foe that had no idea who they were truly messing with. The day the demolition announcement arrived was etched in my memory, a moment that shattered the tranquility of my summer. I was sitting on the porch of the cabin, savoring the familiar scent of pine and reminiscing about my grandfather's stories, when a loud knock at the door jolted me from my reverie. It was a courier delivering an official notice from the Homeowners Association. As I unfolded the document, my heart sank. The HOA had scheduled a demolition of my grandfather's cabin for the following week. They claimed it was an immediate threat to community standards and cited vague regulations about property aesthetics. The words blurred before my eyes as disbelief washed over me. How could they act so rashly, so cruelly? This wasn't just a structure to me, it was a sanctuary filled with memories, laughter, and love, now reduced to bureaucratic jargon. I felt a mix of fury and despair as I read through the notice again, each line fueling my determination to fight back. The cabin had stood for generations, a symbol of our family's resilience and connection to this land. Yet here were these entitled individuals wielding their power like a weapon against something they couldn't comprehend. In that moment, I knew this wasn't merely about preserving a building. It was about standing up for what was right, for honoring my grandfather's legacy. They had underestimated me, and now they would pay the price for their arrogance. I would not let them erase our history without a fight. As the weight of the demolition notice settled heavily on my shoulders, I found myself grappling with a secret I had kept hidden from my neighbors: my position as a Supreme Court justice. To them, I was simply a quiet resident who enjoyed the serenity of nature and the memories tied to my grandfather's cabin. They had no inkling of the authority I wielded or the legal prowess that came with my title. This dual identity had always been a source of both comfort and conflict. In my professional life, I fought tirelessly for justice and fairness, but here, among the trees and memories, I was just a grandchild cherishing the past. My heart raced as I considered how the HOA's actions were not only an affront to my family, but also a blatant violation of property rights. They had crossed a line without realizing they were challenging someone who understood the law inside and out. The contrast between my roles was stark. In my judicial robes, I commanded respect and authority. In this community, I was just another homeowner watching helplessly as a part of my heritage faced destruction. Yet this very situation galvanized me. The arrogance of the HOA members to think they could act without repercussions ignited a fire within me. I would harness both identities, the justice who upheld the law and the grandchild who cherished a legacy, to fight back against this injustice. They believed they were untouchable. Little did they know that they were about to face not just any resident, but someone prepared to hold them accountable for their actions. With determination coursing through my veins, I set out to gather evidence and allies to take on the Homeowners Association. The first step was to delve into the HOA's own regulations, searching for any inconsistencies or violations that could work in my favor. I spent hours poring over their bylaws, looking for loopholes or any mention of historical preservation that they had conveniently overlooked in their rush to demolish my grandfather's cabin. Next, I reached out to fellow residents who shared my concerns about the HOA's authoritarian tactics. I organized a small gathering at the local cafe, inviting neighbors who had also felt the sting of the association's heavy-handedness. As we shared stories of their overreach, a sense of camaraderie began to form. Many expressed their frustration with the HOA's lack of transparency and their tendency to impose fines for minor infractions. It was evident that I wasn't alone in my fight. I also connected with local historians and preservationists who understood the cultural significance of structures like my grandfather's cabin. They offered their insights and documented evidence about the architectural value of rustic homes in our community. Together, we began compiling testimony and photographs that highlighted the cabin's role in our neighborhood's history. As I gathered this evidence, I felt a sense of empowerment growing within me. Each conversation and piece of documentation reinforced my resolve. The HOA may have underestimated me as a quiet resident, but now they would face a united front, neighbors ready to stand up against their entitlement and an advocate armed with knowledge ready to fight for justice. The scales were tipping, and I was determined to make sure they knew it. As I gathered momentum for my fight against the HOA, their arrogance became increasingly evident, a quality that would ultimately seal their fate. During a community meeting, the HOA president, Margaret Hargrove, took center stage, exuding an air of superiority as she presented their plans for neighborhood improvements. She spoke dismissively about any opposition to their agenda, her tone dripping with condescension. "Change is necessary for progress," she declared, glancing around the room as if daring anyone to challenge her. I watched as she brushed off concerns from residents who valued the character and history of our community. It was clear that Margaret saw herself as the gatekeeper of taste, convinced that her vision was the only one that mattered. Her words ignited a fire in me. She had no idea who she was up against. After the meeting, I overheard her and other board members laughing about how they could bulldoze anything that didn't fit their perfect image of the neighborhood. They spoke of my grandfather's cabin as if it were merely an obstacle in their way, oblivious to its emotional and historical significance. This ignorance only fueled my resolve. Their entitlement blinded them to the consequences of their actions. The more they flaunted their power and disregarded the community's sentiments, the more allies I gained. Neighbors who had once been indifferent began to rally behind me, inspired by the audacity of the HOA's arrogance. It became clear that while they believed they were untouchable, they were sowing the seeds of their own downfall. Their underestimation of both my determination and the strength of our community would soon come back to haunt them. With the evidence gathered and community support solidified, it was time to devise a legal strategy that would bring the HOA to justice. Drawing from my experience as a Supreme Court justice, I knew that the key to winning this battle lay in framing our case not just as a matter of personal loss, but as a violation of fundamental rights that resonated with many in our community. First, I began by drafting a comprehensive legal complaint against the HOA. The crux of our argument focused on their failure to follow due process in their decision-making. By circumventing proper channels and neglecting to consider the historical significance of my grandfather's cabin, they had not only acted irresponsibly but also illegally. I emphasized the need for community engagement in such decisions, citing state laws that protected historical properties. Next, I organized a coalition of residents willing to testify about their experiences with the HOA's overreach. Their stories would serve as powerful evidence of a pattern of behavior that showcased their disregard for the very people they claim to represent. I also reached out to local historians who could provide expert testimony about the cultural value of my grandfather's cabin within the broader narrative of our community. As I prepared for the upcoming legal battle, I felt a sense of purpose wash over me. This was not just about reclaiming a piece of property, it was about holding an entitled organization accountable for its actions and restoring integrity to our neighborhood. With each step taken, I could feel the tide turning. Justice was no longer an abstract concept. It was becoming a reality we were all ready to fight for. As the legal proceedings approached, an unexpected twist emerged that would change the dynamics of the case entirely. One afternoon, while reviewing documents at my kitchen table, I received a phone call from an anonymous source. The voice on the other end was shaky but urgent, a former member of the HOA who had come forward with crucial information. "I can't stay silent anymore," the caller admitted. "What they did to your grandfather's cabin isn't just wrong, it was personal." My heart raced as I listened intently. The former member revealed that Margaret Hargrove had long held a grudge against my family, stemming from a perceived slight years ago that had nothing to do with property standards. The demolition was not just an act of arrogance, it was fueled by vindictiveness. This revelation sent shockwaves through my preparations. Armed with this new information, I reached out to this whistleblower and arranged a meeting in a discreet location. They provided me with internal emails and documents that showed how the HOA had conspired to eliminate the cabin because of their personal motives, clearly violating ethical guidelines and possibly legal standards. With this twist in our favor, I realized we now had not only evidence of misconduct, but also a narrative that painted the HOA as tyrants acting out of spite rather than community interest. As I integrated this shocking new layer into our case, I felt an exhilarating rush of hope. The battle for justice was no longer just about reclaiming the cabin. It had transformed into an opportunity to expose the deep-rooted corruption within the HOA, a chance to bring real accountability to those who thought they were above reproach. The day of the courtroom showdown arrived, and the air was thick with tension. The small, packed courtroom buzzed with anticipation as I took my seat at the bench, a place of authority that felt both familiar and surreal. On one side sat the HOA representatives, including Margaret Hargrove, exuding a false confidence that belied the storm brewing beneath their polished exterior. On the other side, a coalition of community members gathered, all eager to see justice served. I began the proceedings with a clear outline of our case, presenting the evidence we had meticulously compiled. The internal emails and testimonies from former HOA members painted a damning picture of an organization driven by personal vendettas rather than community welfare. As I spoke, I could see the discomfort ripple through the HOA's ranks. Their arrogance was being systematically dismantled. When it was time for me to step down from the bench and present my argument as a plaintiff, I felt a surge of determination. I eloquently outlined how the demolition of my grandfather's cabin was not merely an attack on property, but an attack on our shared heritage. My voice resonated with passion as I emphasized the importance of preserving history against the tide of entitlement. Margaret's defense crumbled under cross-examination, her bluster replaced by nervousness as I exposed her motivations for demolition. The courtroom held its breath as witnesses recounted their experiences with the HOA's overreach. In that moment, I knew we were on the brink of something significant, a chance to reclaim not just a cabin, but also the integrity of our community. The gavel would soon strike down on this chapter of injustice, but it was clear that whatever verdict awaited us, change was already in motion. After what felt like an eternity, the moment of truth arrived. As I stood before the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. The jury had deliberated, and now it was time for the verdict that would determine the fate of not just my grandfather's cabin, but also the integrity of our community. As the foreperson stood to announce the decision, silence enveloped the room. "We find in favor of the plaintiff," they declared, and a wave of relief washed over me. the weight of injustice that had hung heavy in the air began to lift. The jury's decision confirmed what we all knew, that the HOA's actions were not only wrong but also illegal. The consequences for the HOA were swift and severe. They were ordered to pay substantial damages for the destruction of my grandfather's cabin and to issue a public apology to our community for their misdeeds. Additionally, the court mandated that they undergo training on ethical governance and community engagement, a measure aimed at ensuring that such a blatant disregard for residents' rights would not occur again. As I stepped down from my position, a chorus of applause erupted from supporters gathered in the gallery. Neighbors who had once felt powerless now embraced each other, celebrating not just a legal victory but a reclaiming of their voices. I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me, gratitude for my allies, for my grandfather's legacy, and for the opportunity to restore justice. This was more than just a win in court, it was a turning point for our community. Together we had defied entitlement, reclaimed our history, and paved the way for a future built on respect and integrity. In the wake of the verdict, a renewed sense of hope and purpose filled our community. With the funds awarded by the court, we set to work on restoring my grandfather's cabin, transforming it from a site of loss into a beacon of resilience. The restoration process was not just about rebuilding walls, it was about rekindling memories and honoring the legacy that had been so carelessly disregarded. Neighbors came together, each contributing their skills and labor. Some brought tools, while others offered fresh paint and labor. As we worked side by side, laughter and stories flowed freely, weaving a tapestry of connection that had been strained by the HOA's arrogance. I watched as my childhood haunt slowly came back to life, its weathered wood polished, its windows shining brightly once more. Amidst the restoration, I found time for reflection. I thought about my grandfather, his unwavering spirit, and the lessons he imparted. He had always taught me to stand firm in the face of adversity and to cherish the bonds of community. This experience had not only solidified those lessons, but had also shown me the power of unity. As we placed the final touches on the cabin, I felt a profound sense of closure. The cabin stood proud once again, a symbol of our collective strength and determination. It was no longer just a structure, it was a reminder that justice prevails when we stand together against entitlement and injustice. On the day we unveiled the restored cabin, friends and family gathered for a celebration. We toasted to resilience, shared stories of the past, and looked toward a brighter future, one where our community would protect its history with pride and vigilance. As the sun set on the day of our celebration, casting a warm golden glow over the restored cabin, I felt an overwhelming sense of satisfaction. Surrounded by friends, family, and neighbors, I realized that this moment was more than just a victory. It was a culmination of resilience, unity, and justice. The air was filled with laughter and chatter, stories shared about my grandfather's legacy mingling with hopes for the future. We gathered around a fire pit in front of the cabin, its flames flickering like the memories we cherished. As I looked around at the smiling faces, I understood that we had not only reclaimed a physical space, but had also strengthened our community bonds. Each person present had played a part in this journey, standing up against an entitled HOA that had tried to erase our history. I took a moment to address everyone, my voice steady as I spoke from the heart. This cabin represents more than wood and nails, it embodies our shared values and determination. Together, we have shown that when we stand united against injustice, we can create meaningful change. The applause erupted, and I could see pride reflected in everyone's eyes. The journey had been fraught with challenges, but ultimately it led to a deeper understanding of what it meant to be part of a community. As the stars twinkled overhead, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. We had turned a chapter marked by loss into one filled with hope and resilience. The cabin would stand as a testament to our fight for justice, a reminder that entitlement may rear its head, but together we can always rise above.